Welcome, beautiful souls, to another episode of Pain to Power, where we talk all things healing, growth, and turning pain into power. Today, I'm honored to be welcoming Andy Kelley to the show. Andy is also known as the Boston Buddha. He's a meditation teacher and mindfulness coach who has made his mission to demystify meditation and make it accessible to busy people from all walks of life. Through his workshops, corporate trainings, and personal coaching, Andy teaches practical tools that help reduce stress, increase focus, and bring more balance into everyday living. On a personal note, I first learned to meditate from Andy about 13 years ago. What struck me most was how accessible he made the practice feel. Not overwhelming or complicated, but something anyone could do, even in the middle of a busy life. That experience planted a seed for me, and I know today's conversation will offer the same kind of inspiration to you as well. So, welcome, Andy. I'm so grateful to have you here today.
Oh, what an honor to be here with you. Thank you so much for even thinking of me. And I love the fact that you've been meditating for 13 years. It is such a wonderful gift to give to yourself and then hopefully gives to others just by the act of doing it.
Well, I feel like it's a gift that you gave to me because it has brought me through some of the biggest stresses and traumas that I've experienced. And I think I mentioned to you when we spoke on the phone that even the day that my daughter passed on, I meditated. And it was something that brought me through the biggest heartache of my life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is one of those things where if you can do it, it makes it hard for you to actually sit and do it in something so traumatic because I've never actually been through what you've been through. But the fact you're able to do it and just slow your thoughts down for a second or just observe what's going on in that part of your life is really powerful for the later ones. And, because it's always the balance between, because meditation, I always say, doesn't make you, joy and happy all the time, but it hopefully makes you a little bit more fulfilled in what you're doing, but helps you be able to handle a stressful situation a little bit more easily than you would have, without it. Absolutely.
Exactly.
That's been my
Exactly.
experience, with the exception of, like I said, of not having anything traumatic like my daughter passing away or husband.
Right. Well, trust me, I cried through the whole meditation, but it was helpful. Like I needed it. But
Thank
I'm so happy to have you here today. And I was wondering if you can share your personal journey into meditation and what inspired you to become the Boston Buddha.
All right, sure. Sure. I'll try to give a shorter, as short as I can version of it. But basically, when I kind of graduated from college, I always say that I grew up in a very Irish, super Catholic family. I'm in somewhere in the middle of eight, I like to say. So it's really hard for me to figure out where I kind of fall in line. But my parents, I had great parents. They taught me to push, work hard, focus, you'll succeed. And so I did. I put myself through college. I graduated, started working in television. So I worked in broadcast television for the first 15 years out of college. And when you're in your 20s, that's what you do. You go to the job, you work in 6, 7 days a week, 10, 12 hours a day, but you're putting in the hours and you're climbing the corporate ladder. So it requires a lot of discipline, focus, and hard work. But it got to a point about 6 years in where I was like, I was told if I did all this stuff that I would be happier in my life. And I was coming home from work exhausted, could fall asleep, but couldn't stay asleep. I started to develop like a really bad sleeping disorder where I'd need something to help me go to sleep. And then in the morning, I need something to help me wake up. And it became this thing where if I worked so hard and I was promised that with that effort that I would be successful and happy, why wasn't I? And so my wife, oh, I also call my spiritual guru, she was the one that kind of led me down this path in a way. It's funny, when we first met, she would always say things to me like, "You have such great energy." And I was so close-minded at the time, I'd be like, "I don't know what that means." So it, it was one of those things where I had to slowly be led to meditation or anything outside, like yoga or whatever people, are practicing spiritually. And so she gave me a book by Deepak Chopra, who I think I probably told you this before, but that I don't necessarily recommend because it's like 25 years old now. But at the time, it had like a short section on meditation. So I was reading the book and I was surprised at how much I connected with Deepak, who was a physician here, at South Shore Hospital. He was the chief resident for years, and he was uh, Maharishi Yogi's physician, one of the founders of Transcendental Meditation. So I was like, okay, well, here's a guy that is proving to me how meditation works. And that's something that if you're going to get an Irish Catholic guy like me to do, you're going to have to prove to me that it works with some sort of science. And he was able to do that. But it wasn't enough to kind of get me into it, but it was enough to spark that, okay, there's got to be other people out there too. So I started reading books by John Kabat-Zinn, big mindfulness. I was a pioneer in the mindfulness movement. Tara Brach, people that deal with radical acceptance, Sharon Salzberg. So I started to get little pieces of different modalities and different people teaching mindfulness and meditation, but I was also still not sleeping. So I was like, all right, I need to take a class in this. So I went to New York. I took a class at the Chopra Center. And it was there that I found that calming and that restorative power of meditation. But I will preface this, and I like to do this all the time, is say that it didn't happen overnight. It wasn't,
Oh,
it
for
was one of,
sure.
it's crazy because it's one of those ones where I actually left that weekend saying meditation is not for me. Because when you meditate, you're sitting there and you're learning a little bit about yourself. You start to hear the thoughts that kind of pop up in your head, and then you start to realize, oh my God, not only do all I do is think, I'm not very nice to myself. And here I am beating myself up over and over and over again. I was like, I was better off not knowing I was doing any of this. But because you pay a lot of money to take these courses, I went home and I said, okay, I'm going to give it 30 days. I didn't know what I was doing, Jill. I really didn't. I just sat there every morning. I'd get out of bed 20 minutes early. I'd sit there. I'd kind of go, start to feel my breath as best that I could. I couldn't even do that. The feeling of the breath was so abstract to me at the time. All I could do was just think in, out, or rise, fall, whatever it was. I was using anchor words or mantras like the Soham or whatever it was that I was using, something to hold my attention so it wouldn't drift away so quickly. And about a week in, my wife actually, not even, this is the benefit of someone that meditates too, is that when you start meditating and you do it regularly, it's the other people that are going to notice the shifts in your life probably quicker than you will. My wife started to notice that I was sleeping through the night, something that I hadn't been able to do. So I was like, oh man, if I can sleep just by doing this same thing over and over, all I have to do is do this. If I can sleep 6 hours a night, then anyone can throw any stress at me during the day and I can handle it a lot better, right? Without
Right.
having to use medication or without having to, without basically being sleep deprived. So I kept with it probably about 30 days in. I started to notice, oh, there is a dramatic shift in me. Most of the time, you work with different people and you work in an office and people come in, and you kind of know what they want and you're judging and you start to notice that in your own self-awareness that I can be very judgmental and wow, what if instead of saying, what does this person want? Why don't I try to see if I can just help them? And how does that feel? And so I started to shift my perception of a me to a we, whereas it became much easier to deal with people that usually would kind of irritate me in certain ways. And I was becoming more mentally flexible. So it goes back to like looking at like something can be so powerful, but it's also so simple if you
I
just
agree.
if you just do it every day. And
Yeah.
so I did that for 4 or 5 years. I like to think I became a better director, a more patient producer. Um, but I also started to notice because I had a baby boy at the time that there were a lot of guys out there like me that maybe are like myself, too intimidated to go to a yoga studio, don't want to really explore the touchy-feely side of meditation. I could help them be a little bit more successful in their careers, but then naturally just overall happier in their lives and hopefully a little bit more fulfilled. So I started working in the schools in Milton, and then that expanded to, all kind of Metro Boston and a little bit of the South Shore, where I go into different schools and work with educators, to private classes where I teach half kind of yoga, half meditation, and then workshops for corporations. And it gave me the freedom to really be with my kids. So I have a son and a daughter, and really be there and not think about work or not think about what I need to do later. Really enjoy the moments and the rich experiences it is to have a family. And then guess what? I found out, oh, this is what happiness is. It's not being happy all the time, but it's that, ah, this is what I'm supposed to feel in these times, not the stress and the anguish of everything piling on to me. It's knowing what to get rid of, the useless thoughts, and connect back to what's really happening in my own direct experience. So I don't know if that kind of gives a long-winded summary of how I got into it, but it was certainly the catalyst that got me into, okay, helping people be present in their life because we're only here for such a short time anyway.
That's so true. And Deepak Chopra is a big influence in my spiritual experience. I found that a lot of his books were very hard to digest, like
Mhm.
to understand. He put things a little high level for me, and I had to read some of them over and over again. But I love, like you talk about the simplicity of the so hum and the in, out, in, out. That's what got me when I went to your class, and I think I mentioned to you, I had tried to meditate for years before I came to your class. And I just, like you, I said, oh, it's not for me. It's not for me. It's not for me. And then Tracy D'Arpino of the Fit Factor had said, hey, come, we're having the Boston Buddha. I said, oh, okay. I wanted to get to know her a little bit better. And I said, oh, this is a good opportunity. And for the first time, I felt like I truly meditated. I sat in that class with a room full of people,
Right.
and that so hum mantra got me out of the thinking mind and just had me focusing on nothing but these words, so hum, so hum. And it was transformational. And like you said, it didn't happen overnight. I say I've been meditating for 13 years, but after your class, I saw the possibilities.
Sure.
I started doing it more often, and then it became, I was going through some tumultuous stuff with my relationship, my children. I'm 10 years sober. So I was still drinking at the time, but even though I was drinking, I think it was helping me to get to the point where I no longer wanted to do that.
So awesome.
um, so it was a big catalyst for change in my experience, and I'm so grateful that you're teaching in the spaces that you are. Can you tell me what kind of feedback that you've had from some of these organizations that you've gone into, like the corporate settings or the school settings, and what they've said about what you've taught there?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I feel like first of all, congratulations on your sobriety journey. I think that's fantastic. And I think meditation does, in a weird way, help you see things a little bit more clearly. Because a lot of the feedback that I get, at least in the corporate, is somebody, and if you need medicine, take it type of person.
Sure.
Um, but sometimes people want to get off some things. And what I've found is when, in a handful of times I can say where somebody is ready to stop doing something that is not helpful to them, I've found that meditation can be helpful. So I'll see that more in a one-on-one setting with someone where, um, all sorts of things, but that comes to mind. The being able to donate blood without passing out comes to mind. I'll get like every now and again, I love getting emails from somebody, just basically saying I'm still meditating. That makes my day, believe it or not. Like if I teach a room full of 50 people and a month later I get an email from two, that's fantastic to me. And usually at that point they need a little extra help on something that's going on. So the feedback that I get in corporations is mostly, okay, I'm still doing it. Maybe I don't feel any change. Okay, we'll keep at it, or maybe I change it, or I'm falling asleep. All right, well, maybe we'll change the time of day, or maybe don't run, 6 miles and then try to meditate because your body naturally will want to fall asleep. Or don't eat a big meal. Your body will naturally want to fall asleep. So I'll get that. A lot of the times in the education space, I think the best thing I get is when you do those faculty workshops and you go in and you work with some of those educators and they come back and say to me, you know, it's not so much that I felt calmer, it's just so and so, we'll say Jimmy, wasn't able to push the buttons that he usually pushes with me. I was more relaxed, less reactive.
Subtle. It's a
Right?
very subtle change. And but over time, those subtle changes grow and grow and grow. And our baseline increases, right? So because we're all going to fall off, right? So because life happens
Sure.
around you. So when you have a baseline that starts here and you're always irritated and you're always flipping out over things, and this is your baseline, but then you start meditating and you become a little bit calmer and your baseline comes now up to here
Right.
and you fall off, you're only going to fall to here. You're not going to fall down to there.
It's a great analogy. It's such a great analogy. And it also wakes you up to the fact that what are you practicing? Am I
Right.
practicing losing my temper and being overreactive? Or can I practice that awareness? And so, yeah, you're right. It definitely doesn't go down back to the what the original set point is. You're elevating it, and that's what makes it so powerful over time. Because the more you do it, the more it's like doing, I always say it's like doing mental push-ups or any type of repetition, like curls. Like you can do it once, great. You're not going to see any difference. But if you do it for a month or so, you'll see some definition because you're putting in the work. It's the same with meditation. Um,
Right.
I think, and honestly, in at least in America, I can say that I think we need to look at meditation the same way we look at physical exercise. I mean, we all know that we need to move and we need to move our body and we need to elongate our muscles and get oxygen into the body. We need to do the same for our cognitive capacity as well.
I totally agree. How do you bridge the gap between ancient practices and modern busy lifestyles?
Examples usually I think you got to pay your respect to, the Eastern. You got to look at meditation in a couple ways. One is it's 2,600 years old at least, right? And it dates back to the Buddha and the many other teachers that came before him. But over time, it's been transmitted person to person. Usually, it was never really written down. It was just you were taught by your teacher, and they had an apprentice, and it worked its way up and kind of marinated over those years until to now what we know as meditation, which doesn't have to be, that seven-seated posture where your spine is erect. And I know, yeah, if my spine is erect, then I'm going to get a better oxygen flow to the brain. But I'm also 50 years old. I'm not going to be able to sit in that spot, in that space. I don't have the stomach muscles anymore. So if I were to tell you you have to sit in that spot and honor that tradition, then I've lost a meditator or I've lost me. And I always kind of aim at me. I aim at
Yeah.
how immature and just not spiritually awake I was 20 years ago. And I try not to use words like, the wellness guy, because I go back 20 years and I say, okay, we're bringing in the wellness guy to teach a workshop. I'm rolling my eyes going, I don't have time for that today. I need to get work done. So I kind of put myself in their position. And then I'm Irish. I make jokes about pretty much everything. And I try to make it just easy, acceptable. And I point out the many roadblocks that I hit along the way in my own journey to be able to say, okay, well, that has happened to me. And then, like you said, the reality of falling off. Like the other day, I was teaching someone, and she's like, um, "Well, how am I going to be able to do it? I have a 2-year-old, and I just had an infant, and she's 6 months old. Well, when am I going to find the time?" And I just looked at her and I said, "You're not. You're screwed. You can't do it, right? Like you have to be able to like at least start with like, okay, now let's break it down. You accept the fact that you have a lot going on. Now, how can we get this into your busy lifestyle? Is it okay to put them in, the 2-year-old in front of a device so you can sit for 10, 20 minutes? So you can be then more available, more present for that kid. Because sometimes there is the guilt of it. It's like, okay, what if I put my daughter in front of, her iPad?
About the micro moments that you can meditate. And it sounds silly, but you go to the bathroom every day, right? And I will sit in the bathroom and I'll just breathe while I have to be there anyways. Just breathe. Breathe while you're doing the dishes. It's kind of incorporating it into the activities of everyday life.
Right. Or practice being there, right? Practice
Right.
being there washing the dishes. Okay. Because even though, and some people teach visualizations or what's called yoga nidra, and I don't teach those because I always say my goal is to help you be here in the very short time that we have lucky enough to be on this planet. to be here and not wish I was someplace else. So if I'm washing the dishes and I'm wishing I was in Aruba and in the sand and it's great, right? My mind is still traveling though, and I'm not there. I'm not dealing with washing the dishes. What would happen if you really just felt the water, washed the dishes, were present with it, took some, obviously I started to take more pride in how I washed the dishes. And right, and that kind of little things, those micro moments you're talking about, start to extend into every aspect of your day. And that's mindfulness. It doesn't have to be, oh, I have to sit for 20 minutes, twice a day or an hour or whatever people think it is. It doesn't have to be that.
I agree. I will feel like when I'm washing the dishes, I will feel like, oh, that is absolutely the perfect temperature. And I am while I'm washing, I can feel the coffee grinds running through the filter and how they're falling out and how I like the way the water feels on my skin in this moment. Those are the micro moments
But
that
you're
you get
also,
to meditate.
what I love about what you just said there is three times I heard you express gratitude. Right? In the
Right.
gratitude aspect of looking at a situation like the dishes, oh, I should be great. You're grateful you have the dishes, grateful to feel the water. Oh, it's warm. Like all of these things that we can start to shift our perspective from always drifting towards that negativity bias to more of appreciation and more acceptance and more gratitude.
Exactly. Exactly. How can parents introduce mindfulness to their children in a teachable and approachable way?
I think the easiest way for parents to integrate it into their children's life, and my own direct experience, which is always I only speak from, is to meditate yourself. Because when I was younger and I started meditating, my son would sit with me some days. Some days he would climb on me. Some days he would just like, he was like Yoda. He was like the teacher that just constantly tried to annoy me. Um, and I think having that approach to it helped cultivate his awareness into wanting to sit. And sometimes it then becomes a struggle. And then knowing when and how long to do it for, right? The duration is so important for a kid because a kid, I always say that the kid's attention span is probably not longer than their age. So
Right.
if you have a 6-year-old, then don't have them sit for more than 5 or 6 minutes because you're gonna it's gonna turn it into a punishment, and that's the last thing I want if for a kid to feel. But I think they get to a certain age, and certainly my kids experience this in middle school, where gets to be a little clicky. It gets to be a little you start to get a little nervous about going to high school, and certainly with my daughter, I getting her in a structured, morning meditation, which was just like brushing your teeth. Okay, we're going to meditate 5 days a week. That's it. Right before school, we're going to sit for 10 minutes. We're going to do something simple. Either I do a counting meditation a lot because the kids need something to do. They can't just
Hmm.
sit there because they're not going to pay attention. So I do a nice counting meditation where you breathe in one, breathe out one, breathe in two, breathe out two. And I have them go up to 8 and then start over. And when the 5 minutes is up, the bell goes off. Usually what you can find is how aware were they? Like usually kids will be like, well, I got to like 12 and the instructions was to stop at 8, right? So you're learning, okay, so my mind drifted. So next time I can be a little bit more focused. Or the other one I'll hear is uh I breathed in one but breathed out two, right? Because that's the natural tendency to breathe in and out. And so getting them to focus just a little bit, but not on anything super specific, I think helps them just cultivate that awareness for when they're not meditating. So I'd say time in introducing it at the right age. I also think in my own experience of teaching K through 12, I stopped teaching K through 2 because I really believe that we all have a natural set point in the mind of being. And I don't think that's taught out of you until you're integrated into a school system
I
where
agree.
in second grade, when you're going into third grade, and in Massachusetts anyway, you take the MCAS or some type of standardized testing, and then it becomes you start to see the stress in these kids. And they've also formed their friends and they have enough layers of conditioning on them where meditation to me makes sense, where the default mode of the brain is now shifting from being, which the kids are, they're in the beginner's mind. They're always excited. They don't care if they make a mistake. They don't care if they raise their hand and say something say something silly because everyone's like that, right? But in
Right.
third, raise your hand and you say, the answer is five and it's really 25 and you're embarrassed and everyone's laughing at you, you're probably not going to raise your hand again because
Exactly.
you've built that conditioning. So being able to know that I'd say third grade on is where they start to shift their default mode from being to doing. Where
Yeah,
everything is go, go,
I
go,
agree
do,
with that.
do.
From 0 to 7 is where they're in the being,
Yeah.
I think, and from 7 on. And I have a video that plays on. I have one of those digital picture frames, and I have a little video of my grandson, and he's 21 months now, and he's walking with a wheelbarrow. And he's walking along, walking along, walking along. And he dumps the wheelbarrow, and then he starts walking, 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 and he falls down. He gets back up, and he just keeps going.
Yeah.
No thought, just in the moment, and he's focused on something, and he just goes,
What a cool.
and I love watching it. Every time it plays, I stop and I look at it, and I love how he's just there.
Yeah.
He's just in that moment, and it doesn't matter that he fell down.
Right.
And I,
Right.
I I wish we could all get that sense of it's okay to make a mistake. And even with meditation, you're not going to get it right. I find sometimes in my meditations, I get up and I say, wow, I had monkey mind the whole time. Oh,
Mm.
well, better luck next time.
Right.
And move on with it. It's not just because I've been doing it for a lot of years now, doesn't mean I'm perfect at it. And I don't strive for perfection. I strive for consistency, and it brings a lot of peace and balance into my life.
That's
So
wonderful.
yeah,
And
that's what I love to convey to our listeners today.
and the practice. Remember that it's a practice, something that you've been doing and I've been doing for a long time. But it wasn't like of the first few years, if I had a meditation, I would say that was a terrible meditation because I didn't have the self-awareness yet to be able to say, no, no, thoughts are such an important part of your meditation. It lets you know, one, that you're here, that you're thinking, but also
Mhm.
how you're treating yourself. It also gives you that space to start to build a bubble around that thought to be able to say, okay, well, that's not me. That's just a thought that I'm having in this field of awareness. And I don't have to believe that thought anymore. Whereas before I was so asleep in my meditations, I deemed it as a bad meditation. So
Yeah,
the idea of it being a meditation practice and what you said about consistency is the most important part. Because for the first month, at least, and this I think will be helpful to your listeners, I didn't know what I was doing, but I still did it. I swear I
yeah.
didn't know. I didn't know what I was doing. I thought I was wasting my time.
Mhm.
And then something happens where, oh, it starts to make a little bit more sense.
Yeah.
Um, so stick with it and keep in the consistency.
Yeah. I tell people to start small, that you don't have to sit for an hour cross-legged on the floor. I tell people start with a minute, maybe two,
Mm.
and see how you do with that. I mean, most people can sit for a minute,
Right,
right?
right,
So you start with a minute and do that for a few days, and 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 then try 2 minutes, and then keep going from there. And it does eventually, as you say, it builds up over time, and you get better and better at it. And it the effects of it become more noticeable and profound in your life.
right. I also feel like that if if some people will try too much too soon. Right? Because people say, okay, well, I have 20 minutes that I can just go to wake. I'm going to wake up early. They've never been a morning person. I'm going to wake up early. And yeah, there's no motivation to keep going. Like you're eventually going to wake up early, come downstairs. You're going to be a little bit more tired than you were the day before. Then you're falling asleep and you're like, well, this isn't really worth it anyway. So starting small, 5, 10 minutes, maybe once a day. Do that for a few weeks. Log it. Like, how do you feel during the meditation? And then maybe take it at the end of the day, do a little recapitulation, say, how did I feel for the rest of the day? You'll start to see a pattern of, okay, well, today, for me, I always go back to that first journal that I had, where it was basically terrible, terrible, terrible. I'm wasting my time. I don't understand this. To all of a sudden, well, I feel how did it feel later in the day? Well, I did handle this. I couldn't deny it anymore. I noticed I was trying to deny that it was working. You know what I mean? It was like, so something in me was saying, you're not a meditation guy. And then all of a
Yep.
sudden you're like, oh, I handled that way better than I would have. a few weeks ago. And that type of awareness wakes up into you that says, okay, now it's a non-negotiable. I need to do this 5, 6, 7, whatever it is. And then taking into account, like you said, it doesn't have to be, it preferably isn't a seated practice, right? I'll sit a lot of the times in the morning. It's my non-negotiable because I'll sit on a couch. I put a heating pad on because I go for a run after. I'll put a blanket over me. I want to be as comfortable as possible. I don't want to be cold or distracted. I get what that feels like. So I want to limit some of the distractions for me in the morning. But then later in the day, I meditate when I'm running. Yoga is such a huge meditation because it's no different. If you think about meditation and the object of your attention, you'll have the focus on the breath, but you can still have the focus on the breath in yoga. And then at some point, the yoga guide's going to ask you to move to someplace else. And that someplace else might not, oh, I can't do it as well as the person next to me, or I'm not as flexible as this, or oh my gosh, I want to run tomorrow. She's assisting me and my hamstring's going to hurt. Like all of these are the same thoughts you'd have in a seated practice. They're just amplified because you're moving. And
Right.
so knowing to then, oh, well, what can I do in this situation? I could keep catastrophizing on what my run's going to be like later, or I can breathe myself back to the moment. And every time you breathe yourself back to the moment, you're strengthening those neural circuits in the brain that are going to help you be more present, have a better memory, be more compassionate, not just with yourself, but with others.
Yeah. I personally sit in hero's pose in the morning because I used to sit cross-legged because I thought that's what you're supposed to do.
Right.
And I found that I had hip pains. I found a hero's pose bench. So it's a little seated bench that I sit on in the morning. And I find that that works very well for me. But it's just a matter of breathing into it, getting there, the practice, and it's been a game changer for me, and I'm hoping that our listeners today will feel the passion and see the hope in the future for this. Andy, where can people learn more about you?
I would say that probably the best way is I have every handle that I have on social media is at the Boston Buddha. But my website, thebostonbuddha.com, usually will have where my classes are, or if people want to work with me one-on-one, usually they reach out to me through there, or Andy at thebostonbuddha.com is my email. I think one of the most helpful, probably Instagram and my YouTube. My YouTube and Instagram between the two have over 150 different guided meditations that I've done over the years. They're all live, so it's not, I mean, there are a few that are recorded to be guided meditations, but I think that's probably the most helpful for people.
Andy, thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing your wisdom. I know firsthand how powerful your teaching is, and I'm so grateful that over a decade ago you made meditation feel so simple and accessible for me. I hope everyone listening takes away not only inspiration, but also the reminder that mindfulness is something each of us can bring into our daily lives. If today's conversation spoke to you, please take a moment to like this episode, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who could use a little more peace and presence in their life. Your support helps me keep creating meaningful conversations like this one, and it makes sure you don't miss any of the empowering content we have coming up. Until next time, keep breathing, keep growing, and remember, your healing matters.